Captain Jake Morrison walked across the bridge of the Earth cargo ship New Horizon and looked out at the empty black space through the big window. Stars dotted the darkness like tiny diamonds, but they gave him no comfort today. His ship was stuck in a part of space where no human had ever been before. The hyperdrive had broken 3 days ago, and now they could not jump back to Earth or any of the colonies. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and turned to look at his crew. 43 good people counted on him to get them home safely. Most of them had families waiting on Earth or the outer colonies. The thought of letting them down made his stomach twist with worry. Communications Officer Lisa Grant sat at her station with sweat running down her face. She had been working for hours to boost their emergency signal. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried different frequencies and power levels. The distress beacon was their only hope of getting rescued before their food ran out. "Any luck with that distress signal, Lisa?" Jake asked as he walked over to her station. Lisa wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and shook her head. "I have managed to extend our SOS transmission by 30%, Captain. If there is anyone out there, they should pick it up within the next few hours. The signal is now reaching about 12 light years in all directions." Jake nodded, but his worry did not go away. 12 light years sounded like a lot, but space was huge and mostly empty. The chances of another ship being close enough to hear their call for help were very small. Chief Engineer Dan Phillips crawled out from under a control panel near the back of the bridge. His blue uniform was stained with green coolant fluid and black grease. Small cuts on his hands showed how hard he had been working to fix their broken systems. Dan was the best engineer Jake had ever worked with, but even he could not work miracles. "Captain, I need at least 72 more hours to repair the hyperdrive," Dan said as he stood up and stretched his sore back. "The main coupling burned out completely, and I have to rebuild it from spare parts. The problem is we do not have all the right materials on board." Jake felt his heart sink. 3 more days was a long time when you were stranded in unknown space. "What about our supplies, Dan? How long can we last if we ration everything carefully?" Dan looked uncomfortable as he answered. "Our food reserves will last maybe 5 days. If we cut everyone to half portions, water is not a problem because our recycling system is working fine. But Captain, 5 days is cutting it very close." Jake turned back to the window and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there might be other intelligent life. Earth had been searching for aliens for hundreds of years, but had never found any proof they existed. Now, when humans needed help the most, they could only hope that someone was listening. What Jake and his crew did not know was that their distress call had already been heard. Far away in the Vega system, a monitoring station belonging to the Galactic Confederation had picked up their transmission. The station was run by insect-like aliens called the Klaxon race. Commander Zix 441 stared at the strange message on his screen with 4 of his compound eyes. His mandibles clicked nervously as he read the translation again. The message was from beings who called themselves humans from a planet called Earth. But what worried him most was their claim about where they came from. "Navigator Thys, come look at this," Commander Zix 441 called to his assistant. Thys was from the Nereid species and looked like a tall blue humanoid with gills on her neck. She swam through the water-filled corridors of their station and arrived at his command center quickly. "What have you found, Commander?" Thys asked as she looked at the message display. "A species calling themselves humans from a planet called Earth," Zix 441 replied with worry in his voice. "But look at this part, Thys. They claim to be from a Class 12 death world. That is impossible. No intelligent species has ever evolved on anything above a Class 8 world." Thys felt her gills flutter with fear as she read the message. The galactic classification system rated planets based on how dangerous they were to life. Most civilized species came from Class 2 or Class 3 worlds. These were peaceful garden planets with stable weather and few dangerous animals. Even the toughest warrior races in the galaxy came from Class 6 worlds at most. A Class 12 death world was something that existed only in theory. Such a planet would have extreme weather, deadly radiation, high gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and creatures that could kill most galactic species instantly. No sane being would try to live on such a world. And the idea that intelligence could evolve there was beyond belief. "Commander, what should we do?" Theiss asked. "Should we respond to their distress call?" Zix-441 thought carefully before answering. Galactic law said they had to help any species in distress, but this situation was unlike anything they had faced before. If these humans really came from a Class 12 death world, they might be the most dangerous beings anyone had ever encountered. "Protocol says we must investigate," Zix-441 finally replied. "But we will approach with extreme caution. If these beings truly evolved on a Class 12 world, they might be more dangerous than anything we can imagine. Alert the diplomatic corps and request a first contact team. We will need experts in dangerous species interaction." As Theiss sent out the alert messages, Commander Zix-441 continued to study the human transmission. The more he read, the more worried he became. These humans described their broken ship and asked for basic assistance with repairs and supplies. They sounded calm and polite like any other species in distress. But if they really came from a death world, their calm behavior might hide incredible strength and survival instincts. Death world survivors would have to be tough beyond imagination just to live through each day. They would need to fight deadly predators, survive extreme weather, and adapt to constant danger. The thought of meeting such beings both scared and fascinated Commander Zix-441. Part of him wanted to ignore the distress call and pretend they had never received it. But his duty to the Galactic Confederation was clear. They had to investigate and offer help if possible. 3 hours later, the diplomatic ship Harmony's Voice was launched from the main Confederation base. It carried a full first contact team, including experts in xenobiology, psychology, and military tactics. They would approach the human ship carefully and try to determine if these strange beings were friends or a threat to galactic peace. Meanwhile, on the New Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison continued to pace the bridge and worry about his crew. He had no idea that his simple distress call was about to change the course of galactic history forever. The GCS Harmony's Voice moved slowly through space toward the stranded human ship. Captain Zix-441 had ordered all defensive systems to be ready and all crew members to stay at battle stations. The sleek white diplomatic vessel looked peaceful, but it carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon if needed. On the bridge of the alien ship, 3 beings sat around a curved control panel. Commander Zix-441 clicked his mandibles nervously as he watched the human vessel grow larger on the main screen. His insect-like body was covered in shiny black armor that reflected the bridge lights. Next to him, Navigator Theiss checked her instruments, with webbed fingers while her gills moved quickly with worry. The third member of their first contact team was Dr. Mellon from the Centauri species. She looked like a tall, thin humanoid with pale green skin and large black eyes. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and diplomatic skills. Dr. Mellon had never met a species she could not communicate with, but today she felt afraid. "Commander, we are now within scanning range of the human vessel," Theiss reported in her watery voice. "I am reading massive amounts of radiation from their ship. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Zix-441 felt his 4 eyes widen with shock. High radiation usually meant dangerous weapons or unstable power sources. "Are they targeting us with some kind of weapon system?" "Negative, Commander," Theiss replied after checking her readings again. "The radiation appears to be coming from their life support systems. I think this might be their normal atmospheric composition." Dr. Mellon leaned forward to study the sensor data on her screen. What she saw made her gasp with horror. "Commander, these readings cannot be correct. Their ship contains atmospheric conditions that would kill most known life forms within minutes." The sensor data showed that the human ship was filled with a gas mixture containing over 20% oxygen. Most galactic species breathed carefully balanced atmospheres with less than 8% oxygen. 20% oxygen was so reactive it could cause explosions and fires that would burn through metal hull plating. Perhaps their life support system is malfunctioning, Zix-441 suggested hopefully. Maybe that is why they sent the distress call. Aboard the New Horizons sensor technician Ben Hayes was watching his instruments carefully when he spotted the approaching alien ship. Ben was a young man with red hair and freckles who had joined the crew straight out of the Space Academy. This was his first deep space mission and definitely his first alien contact. "Captain Morrison, we have got a ship incoming," Ben called out with excitement in his voice. "Configuration unknown, but it is definitely artificial. The design is unlike anything in our databases." Captain Jake Morrison straightened his uniform and walked over to Ben's station. The alien ship on the screen was beautiful with smooth curves and no visible weapons. It looked more like a work of art than a military vessel. "Are they sending any communications, Ben?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. They are hailing us on multiple frequencies. The signal is coming through our universal translator, but the patterns are very complex." Jake turned to Communications Officer Lisa Grant, who was already working to establish contact. "Lisa, open a channel and let's see who our rescuers are." The main screen flickered and changed to show the bridge of the alien ship. Jake and his crew stared in amazement at the three strange beings looking back at them. None of them had ever imagined that first contact would happen like this. Commander Zix-441 was equally shocked by what he saw. The humans looked roughly humanoid, but there were disturbing differences. Their skin was a strange pinkish color, and they had hair covering parts of their heads. Most disturbing of all, they were not wearing any kind of environmental protection suits. "Greetings, beings of the vessel New Horizon," Zix-441 said through his translator device. "I am Commander Zix-441 of the Galactic Confederation. We received your distress signal and have come to investigate your unusual claims." Jake tried to hide his amazement at actually talking to aliens. This was the most important moment in human history, and he wanted to make a good impression. "Thank you for responding, Commander. I am Captain Jake Morrison. We are very grateful for any assistance you can provide. Before we proceed, we must verify your species classification," Zix-441 continued. "You claim to originate from a Class 12 death world. This is highly irregular and, frankly, unbelievable. Most species could not survive even brief exposure to such conditions." Medical Officer Amy Foster had joined Jake on the bridge when they detected the alien ship. Amy was a calm woman in her 30s with brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She had served as a doctor in the Earth Defense Forces before joining the Merchant Marine. "Commander, if you are referring to Earth as dangerous, I suppose." "That depends on your perspective," Amy said as she stepped forward. "We have adapted to our environment over millions of years of evolution. What seems dangerous to you might be normal to us." Dr. Mellon was studying her medical scanners, and what she saw terrified her. The humans showed no signs of environmental suits or breathing apparatus, yet their ship contained atmospheric conditions that would be instantly lethal to her species. The oxygen concentration alone would cause her lung tissues to burn and dissolve. "Captain Morrison," Zix-441 said carefully, "our sensors indicate your vessel contains atmospheric conditions that would kill most known life forms within minutes. The oxygen concentration is over 20%. How are you able to survive in such a toxic environment?" Jake and Amy looked at each other with confusion. They had no idea why the aliens thought their normal air was dangerous. "I am not sure what you mean, Commander," Jake replied. "These are completely normal living conditions for humans. Our atmosphere is roughly 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen with trace gases." The alien crew recoiled in horror when they heard these numbers. 21% oxygen was beyond their worst nightmares. It was like saying they lived in a tank filled with rocket fuel and somehow managed not to explode. "Impossible," Dr. Mellon whispered. No organic life form could survive in such conditions. The cellular damage would be instantaneous and irreversible. Amy realized that the aliens were genuinely terrified of something humans considered completely normal. She tried to reassure them with a gentle smile. "Commander, I understand this might seem strange to you, but I assure you, we are not dangerous. We are peaceful explorers who need help repairing our ship." But her reassuring words had the opposite effect. The fact that these beings could casually survive in conditions that would kill most galactic species only made them seem more frightening. If they could breathe toxic gas, what else could they survive? Navigator Theiss was running more detailed scans of the human ship and finding new reasons to be afraid. "Commander, I am detecting massive structural reinforcement throughout their vessel. The hull plating is thick enough to survive direct impacts that would destroy our ships. Perhaps their world has frequent meteor strikes," Zix 441 suggested weakly. "Commander." This continued. "I am also reading internal gravity levels that are nearly twice galactic standard. How are they able to move around under such crushing force?" The aliens were beginning to realize they had not encountered helpless refugees. They had found apex predators from a world so hostile that its inhabitants had evolved into living weapons simply to survive each day. Dr. Mellon insisted on conducting detailed biological scans of the humans before any rescue attempt could begin. She had convinced Commander Zix 441 that they needed to understand these strange beings before allowing them aboard a Confederation vessel. The scanning process took several hours, and what Dr. Mellon discovered made her question everything she knew about biology and evolution. "Commander, these readings must be wrong," Dr. Mellon said as she stared at her analysis screen. "According to these scans, the humans possess redundant cardiovascular systems. They have backup hearts and secondary blood vessels throughout their bodies." Zix 441 clicked his mandibles nervously as he reviewed the data. "What does that mean exactly, Doctor?" "It means that even if their primary heart is severely damaged, they can continue to function," Dr. Mellon explained with growing alarm. "Most galactic species would die instantly from heart trauma, but these beings could keep fighting." The biological scans revealed even more disturbing information. Human skeletal structures were incredibly dense and reinforced with calcium deposits that could withstand impact forces that would turn most aliens into liquid. Their muscle fibers were packed with proteins that generated strength levels far beyond anything seen in civilized species. "Look at this, Commander," Dr. Mellon continued, pointing to another section of data. "Their healing factor allows them to regenerate damaged tissue at an impossible rate. Minor wounds that would require surgery for us heal naturally within days. Major injuries that would permanently disable our people are temporary inconveniences for them." Captain Jake Morrison had agreed to allow a small diplomatic team aboard the New Horizon to demonstrate that humans were peaceful and harmless. The 3 aliens arrived wearing full environmental suits that made them look like they were entering a chemical waste facility rather than a rescue mission. The humans tried their best to make their guests comfortable, but every attempt seemed to make the aliens more nervous. The simple act of breathing normal air required the visitors to use complex filtration systems built into their suits. Even with protection, they moved carefully, as if expecting the ship to explode at any moment. Ship's cook Tony Russo had volunteered to prepare a meal for their alien guests. Tony was a cheerful man from New York who took pride in his cooking skills. He wanted to show proper hospitality to the beings who had come to help them. Tony decided to keep the menu simple with grilled chicken vegetables and a mild garden salad. When Tony presented the food for analysis, the alien food specialist nearly collapsed inside her environmental suit. Dr. Mellon studied the meal with growing horror and had to sit down to avoid fainting. "This is cooked animal flesh," Dr. Mellon whispered through her suit's communication system. "They deliberately killed a living creature and consumed its burned remains." Tony looked confused by their reaction. "It's just chicken, ma'am. Pretty basic stuff, really. I was trying to keep it simple for our guests since I did not know what you folks might like. The aliens were horrified to learn that humans were natural predators who killed and ate other animals. Most galactic species were herbivores who lived on specially cultivated plants or synthetic nutrients. The idea of deliberately ending another creature's life for food was barbaric beyond imagination. And these plant materials, Dr. Mellon continued as she analyzed the salad. They contain capsaicin compounds that we use as industrial solvents and cleaning agents. How can you consume such toxic substances? Those are just bell peppers and tomatoes, Tony replied, still not understanding their fear. The peppers are pretty mild, actually. I thought about making something spicy, but figured I should start with basic ingredients. Navigator Theiss was exploring the ship's recreational areas when she discovered something that made her call for immediate backup. She had found the New Horizons Fitness Center where off-duty crew members went to exercise and stay in shape during long space voyages. "Commander, you need to see this right away," Theiss called through her communicator. "I have found something that defies all logic." When the alien team arrived at the gym, they found crew member Pete Johnson completing his daily workout routine. Pete was a maintenance worker in his 20s who lifted weights every day to stay strong for his job. The aliens watched in absolute terror as Pete casually lifted metal bars loaded with weight plates. "How are you doing that without mechanical assistance?" Theiss asked through her translator. Her voice shook with fear as she watched Pete perform what seemed like impossible feats of strength. Pete paused in the middle of his bench press, holding weights that exceeded the total body mass of any 3 galactic species combined. "Doing what exactly?" "Oh, this is just my regular workout routine. Got to stay in shape, you know. Can't let myself get weak sitting around on a ship all day." The revelation that this was normal recreational activity for humans sent shockwaves through the diplomatic team. They realized that Pete was not demonstrating combat abilities or showing off his strength. This was simply how humans maintained basic physical fitness. "How much weight are you lifting?" Dr. Mellon asked weakly. "About 250 pounds today," Pete replied as he continued his exercise. "That's pretty light for me, actually. Back on Earth, I could bench press over 300, but ship gravity is a bit different, so I take it easy." The aliens had no reference point for understanding these numbers. 250 pounds was more than any of them weighed. The idea that a human could lift such massive amounts of weight for fun was beyond their comprehension. Pete noticed their shocked expressions and tried to be helpful. "Would you like me to show you some other exercises? We have got a pretty good setup here. There's cardio equipment, free weights, and even a climbing wall." The mention of a climbing wall made Theiss's gills flutter with panic. She quickly scanned the room and found the vertical surface that humans use to practice climbing skills. The wall was covered with small handholds that required incredible grip strength and coordination to use. "You climb vertical surfaces for entertainment?" Theiss asked in disbelief. "Sure, it's great exercise and kind of fun, too," Pete replied with a friendly smile. "Rock climbing is pretty popular back on Earth. Some people climb mountains that are thousands of feet high." The aliens were beginning to understand that they had not rescued helpless survivors from a broken ship. They had encountered apex predators, from a world so hostile that its inhabitants had evolved into living weapons simply to survive each day. Every aspect of human biology and behavior suggested creatures designed for warfare and survival in the most extreme conditions imaginable. What terrified the aliens most was that the humans seemed completely unaware of how dangerous they were. They acted friendly and peaceful while casually demonstrating abilities that could devastate entire alien populations. The diplomatic team realized they were facing beings who could potentially conquer the galaxy without even trying very hard. Word of the human discovery spread through the Galactic Confederation faster than a solar flare. Emergency communication networks carried the terrifying news to every corner of civilized space. Within hours, emergency sessions were called in the High Council chambers on Prima Centauri, where representatives from 237 member species gathered to discuss this unprecedented crisis. High Chancellor Vexus of the Andromedan Council stood before the massive assembly hall. His tall, crystalline form reflected the chamber's lights as thousands of different alien species looked up at him with fear in their eyes. The chamber buzzed with worried conversations in hundreds of different languages as translators worked overtime to keep everyone informed. Fellow beings, we face a situation unlike any in our recorded history, High Chancellor Vexus announced through the Universal Communication System. A species has been discovered that claims to have evolved on a Class 12 death world. Something our scientists have always deemed impossible. The chamber erupted in panicked chatter and frightened communications. Representatives from peaceful garden worlds whispered prayers to their gods while warrior species discussed military preparations. The very idea of death world survivors existing challenged everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. Representative Corlix from the Zarkon Confederacy stepped forward to address the assembly. The Zarkon were considered the toughest warrior race in the galaxy, with thick armor plating and natural weapons built into their bodies. Even they seemed small and fragile compared to the reports about humans. High Chancellor, if these reports are accurate, these humans represent a threat level beyond our current military capabilities, Corlix declared in his deep, rumbling voice. According to the biological scans, a single one of these beings could potentially devastate an entire colony world. Meanwhile, back on the New Horizon, Captain Jake Morrison was having a video conference with Earth's government leaders. The quantum communication system allowed real-time contact with home despite the enormous distance. Secretary General Maria Rodriguez appeared on screen from the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. Captain Morrison, the implications of this discovery are staggering, Maria said from her office overlooking Lake Geneva. We are not just making first contact with alien life, we are apparently terrifying an entire galactic civilization simply by existing. Jake rubbed his forehead as he tried to process the situation. Ma'am, they seem genuinely afraid of us. Dr. Amy has been trying to reassure them, but every test and scan seems to make things worse. They act like we are some kind of monsters. What exactly have they found so frightening? Maria asked. Everything, ma'am, Jake replied with exhaustion in his voice. Our normal atmosphere is toxic to them. Our food is poisonous. Our basic exercise routine looks like superhuman strength demonstrations. They cannot believe we evolved naturally. Back in the Confederation chambers, Dr. Mellon was presenting her complete findings to the scientific committee. Her report painted a picture of beings so perfectly adapted to lethal conditions that they could survive in environments that would kill most galactic species instantly. They consume what we classify as industrial toxins for recreational pleasure, Dr. Mellon reported to the stunned assembly. Ethanol, alcohol, capsaicin compounds, and caffeine are all common in their diet. These substances would cause immediate organ failure in most known species. The scientific committee listened in growing horror as Dr. Mellon continued her presentation. Every aspect of human biology seemed designed for survival in impossible conditions. Their blood contained iron compounds. That would be toxic to most aliens. Their digestive systems could process foods that would poison other species. Their standard recreational activities involve subjecting themselves to physical stresses that would cause immediate system failure in any known species, Dr. Mellon continued. They deliberately expose themselves to extreme temperatures, high impact exercises, and even controlled violence for entertainment. Admiral Kellex of the Confederation Defense Force stood to address the assembly. His people were among the few species that had evolved any kind of military tradition, but even they seemed helpless compared to these new deathworlders. My colleagues, we must consider the possibility that this species does not even realize how dangerous they are, Admiral Kellex announced. Their casual strength demonstrations suggest they are operating at only a fraction of their true capabilities. The fear in the chamber grew even stronger when long-range scout ships reported back with detailed scans of Earth itself. The planet's environmental readings confirmed everyone's worst nightmares about death world conditions. Captain Nix of the scout ship Distant Observer transmitted his findings directly to the High Council. The planet they call Earth shows massive electrical storm systems that generate more energy than our largest power stations, Captain Nix reported through subspace communication. Tectonic activity constantly reshapes the continents, and weather patterns that could destroy our largest cities occur regularly. The scout reports revealed an ecosystem filled with predators that could tear apart the strongest alien battle armor. Yet somehow humans had not only survived on this nightmare world, but had thrived and built a civilization. Even more disturbing, they had learned to coexist peacefully with creatures that could kill most galactic species. They share their world, with apex predators that they have domesticated as companions and pets. Captain Nix continued. These creatures called dogs and cats show loyalty to humans and live in their homes. The psychological implications are staggering. Representative Thix from the Peaceful Botanical Alliance raised a shaking appendage to speak. High Chancellor, if these beings can survive on such a world and domesticate its predators, what does that say about their own predatory nature? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If humans could tame the monsters of their world, it suggested they were even more dangerous than those monsters. The chamber fell into worried silence as every species contemplated what this meant for galactic security. Dr. Mellon added the final terrifying detail to her report. Colleagues, the most disturbing aspect of our findings is that these humans appear to be completely unaware of their own capabilities. They consider their strength, speed, and survival abilities to be normal and unremarkable. High Chancellor Vexus studied the reports and data projections with growing concern. Every analysis suggested that humanity could pose an existential threat to galactic civilization, yet their communications remained friendly, and they had asked only for basic assistance with ship repairs. The question before us is simple, High Chancellor Vexus announced to the Assembly. Do we help these beings as galactic law requires, or do we consider them too dangerous to contact? Before anyone could answer the question, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency broadcasts interrupted the session with news that would change everything. The Devourer swarm had broken through outer defensive lines and was heading straight for the populated core worlds. Admiral Kellix received the tactical updates with growing despair. High Chancellor, our most advanced weapons have proven completely ineffective against Devourer technology. We have perhaps 72 hours before they reach the first inhabited systems. High Chancellor Vexus looked out at the panicked assembly as representatives began evacuating to their home worlds. The galaxy's greatest threat was approaching, and their military forces had failed to stop it. In desperation, he turned to the one option no one wanted to consider. Perhaps, he said quietly, it is time to ask the deathworlders for help. 3 weeks after first contact, an emergency situation arose that would change the relationship between humans and the galaxy forever. The Devourer swarm had been consuming star systems on the outer rim for months, but now it had broken through every defensive line the Confederation could establish. The mechanical plague was heading straight for the densely populated core worlds, where billions of innocent beings would die. High Chancellor Vexus stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council with the worst news in recorded history. The Great Chamber was only half full because many representatives had already fled to evacuate their home worlds. Those who remained listened with growing despair as he delivered his report. Our most advanced weapons have proven completely ineffective against Devourer technology, Vexus announced to the frightened assembly. They adapt to every attack we make and grow stronger with each encounter. Evacuation of the threatened systems would take months we simply do not have. Admiral Kellix had spent sleepless days trying to find a military solution, but every strategy failed against the adaptive enemy. The Devourers were mechanical beings that learned from each battle and modified their defenses accordingly. Traditional. Confederation tactics relied on precise, elegant attacks designed to minimize damage, but this approach only made the enemy stronger. "We need something the Devourers have never encountered before," Admiral Kellox reported grimly. "Every weapon in our arsenal has been analyzed and countered. We need tactics so different that their adaptive systems cannot respond in time." It was Dr. Mellon who made the suggestion that no one wanted to hear. Despite her fear of humans, she had been studying their military history and psychological profiles. What she found gave her a desperate idea that might save the galaxy. "What if we asked the humans for help?" Dr. Mellon said quietly. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The idea of asking the terrifying deathworlders for military assistance was beyond most members' ability to comprehend. These were beings so dangerous that their very existence threatened galactic peace. "You want us to unleash those monsters on the galaxy?" Representative Corlix demanded. "They might be more dangerous than the Devourers themselves." "Perhaps," Dr. Mellon replied with surprising calm. "But they are the only species we have encountered that thinks like predators instead of prey. The Devourers expect us to fight like civilized beings. Humans fight like the universe itself is trying to kill them." Captain Jake Morrison received the desperate request while his crew was still waiting for hyperdrive repairs. Chief Engineer Dan Phillips had finally managed to get their systems partially operational, but they were still days away from full functionality. The human crew was getting restless after weeks of being stranded in alien space. "Captain, we are receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Confederation," Communications Officer Lisa Grant announced with surprise in her voice. "They are asking for our help with something called the Devourer Swarm." Jake studied the tactical data the aliens had provided about their enemy. The Devourer Swarm appeared to be a self-replicating mechanical force that adapted to each weapon used against it. Traditional Confederation strategy involved careful, precise attacks that minimized collateral damage, but this was exactly the wrong approach for fighting an adaptive enemy. "They need someone crazy enough to think outside their rulebook," Jake said to himself as he reviewed the battle reports. Then he smiled grimly as he realized what the galaxy needed. They need deathworlders. Within hours, Jake had assembled a volunteer strike team from his crew. The aliens had made it clear that this was essentially a suicide mission against an enemy that had defeated every military force in the galaxy. Yet when Jake asked for volunteers, almost his entire crew stepped forward to help. Combat Medic Rick Santos was the first to volunteer. Rick had served in Earth's military before joining the Merchant Marine, and he understood warfare better than most of the crew. Security Chief Helen Murphy also stepped forward, along with Engineer Dan Phillips and 12 other crew members who wanted to help save innocent lives. "Captain, we do not even know if our weapons will work against these machines," Rick pointed out as they prepared for the mission. "Then we improvise," Jake replied with confidence. "Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. This is just another day at the office for us." The human strike team commandeered several small Confederate ships and headed toward the last defensive line where the Devourer Swarm was advancing. Their tactics were completely unlike anything the galactic military had ever attempted. Where Confederate forces engaged with precision and caution, the humans attacked with what could only be described as controlled chaos. Security Chief Helen Murphy led the first boarding party onto a Devourer vessel using improvised explosive devices and brutal close-quarters combat techniques. The mechanical enemies had been programmed to counter sophisticated weapons and elegant tactical maneuvers, but they were completely unprepared for humans who fought like apex predators. "These beings fight like wild animals," Admiral Kellox observed, in amazement as he watched the tactical displays from the command center. "They show no fear of death and adapt their strategies faster than our computers can process." The Devourer machines tried to analyze human combat patterns, but there were no patterns to analyze. Each human fighter used different techniques and weapons, creating chaos that the adaptive systems could not counter. Helen smashed through mechanical defenses with a crowbar, while Rick Santos used medical supplies to create chemical explosives. The battle truly turned when engineer Dan Phillips realized something the galactic scientists had missed completely. The Devourer technology was designed to operate in the sterile, controlled environments that most galactic species preferred. The machines were vulnerable to the same harsh conditions that humans considered normal. We do not need to outsmart them, Dan announced over the communication system as he vented atmosphere from a captured Devourer ship. We just need to make their environment as hostile as ours. The human strike team began using their own biology as a weapon against the mechanical invaders. They introduced high oxygen atmospheres that caused explosive failures in Devourer systems. They created temperature variations and electrical interference that disrupted the machine's delicate sensors. What was a deadly environment for most galactic species was just another Tuesday for the humans. They moved through conditions that would kill their alien allies while tearing apart enemy machines with improvised weapons and raw determination. Within 72 hours, the Devourer swarm was in full retreat. Their adaptive systems had been overwhelmed by opponents who treated constant mortal danger as a normal part of existence. The mechanical plague fled toward the outer rim, leaving behind damaged ships and confused programming. 6 months later, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the newly constructed human embassy on Prima Centauri wearing his dress uniform for an official ceremony. The Galactic Confederation had not only welcomed humanity as members, but had requested them to serve as protectors of the dangerous frontier regions that other species could not safely patrol. High Chancellor Vexus approached Jake with what passed for a smile among his crystalline species. Captain Morrison, your people have taught us something valuable about survival. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding danger, but from learning to thrive within it. Jake carefully shook the Chancellor's delicate appendage while being mindful of his strength. We are honored to serve, Chancellor, though I think we are still getting used to being the tough guys in the galaxy. The distress call that had started as a simple SOS had become humanity's introduction to a larger universe where their greatest weakness had become their greatest strength. The deathworlders had shocked the galaxy, but in the end they had saved it too.